In this lesson, we'll explode a component. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to navigate to the animation workspace and use transform components to create an exploded view. In Fusion 360, we're going to use the supplied dataset utility knife. We're going to start by navigating to the animation workspace. The animation workspace allows us to create animations of our components, and in this case, we're going to explore them for an exploded view. This is not going to be an in-depth review of the animation workspace, but we're going to talk about a few basics. The first of which is anytime we make a change to anything in here, we're going to be recording it. Right now, the playhead is at 1 second in the timeline, and if I rotate the view, it's going to capture a camera view from 0 to 1 second. If we play this back, we can see the rotation of our model. We can also select this and delete it. This puts the model back to the original location. At the top in our toolbar, notice that we don't have any modeling tools, but we have options for creating storyboards, transforming components, adding annotations, viewing, and publishing. In our view options, we have the option to stop recording the view, which means that we can freely rotate the model around, making adjustments to the position of components without capturing any camera views. Once we're done, we can turn that option off and it'll snap back to the location. The other option we have is to drag the playhead into the curtain area. The curtain area will allow us to determine the original position of the model before we ever got started. Once we drag this back to 1 second, notice that now the model is in that new position. So now that we understand a bit more about the view, let's talk about actually exploding components. We're only going to be taking a look at moving some of our rubber grips off of the handle and not doing a full exploded view. But in order to do that, we have options in the Transform dropdown. We have Transform Components, which is more of a manual method. We have Restore Home Position. We have Auto Explode for one level and all levels. This is based on the structure of the design. If we have nested components, and in this case we don't. And then we have a Manual Explode option. Show Hide and Appearances will allow us to hide components during the timeline or change their appearances, but in this case we're not going to be exploring those options. What I want to take a look at is Transform Components, because I feel it's going to be the most helpful when you're setting up your own exploded views. To get started, the first thing I'm going to do is stop capturing my view, and then I'm going to select Transform Components. From here, I need to select the component to transform, in this case, this upper position, and I'm going to go to a right view since I'm not capturing my view and simply move this up. Keep in mind that as soon as I click inside of the canvas area, we've now captured that transform. This happened between 0 and 1 second. If I want the next transform to happen over a certain period of time, I need to move the playhead. So I'm going to move it to about 5 seconds, and note that this one here is still between 0 and 1. The next thing that I'm going to move is I'm going to select this grip. Notice, however, that the grip is at a certain angle. If I need to reset that pivot point, what I can do is take a look at the Set Pivot option, and I can move it to a certain location, and then select OK. Now it's positioned based on geometry, and if I zoom out, again because I'm not recording that view, I can move this back. Notice that as I do this, what's actually happening is it's moving it back along that position that's selected, but we're getting some overlap. If that's the case, what we can do is we can reset that by simply removing it, selecting it inside of our storyboard, and getting rid of it once we get out of our transform component. But before we do that, let's go ahead and play through this and see what it looks like. So we can see the overlap between these bodies, so that's something I definitely want to fix. So I'm going to select it and delete it and try again. This time, I'm going to set my pivot based on the origin of my file. What I can do is I can rotate it and I can have it based on my specific coordinate system. If it's not visible, we'll need to expand the components and we can select certain geometry that we know is based on it. For example, the center point of this. I'm going to rotate this 25 degrees. And the reason I'm going 25 degrees is that's a known value for the angle of this handle. So I'm going to say OK. And now that I've reset that pivot point, even though it's no longer on my selected component, I can now drag it back and then I can say OK. I do want to make two other quick notes while we're in here. The trail line visibility will turn on a line from the original component location to its current location. This is extremely helpful, especially when you're doing things like removing bolts and nuts from an assembly. And split transforms. If we have multiple components selected, it'll move each of those into their own item in the storyboard. So let's go ahead and say OK. And now we've created two separate animations. Let's go ahead and play through this. Moves the first grip up, and then there's a slight overlap, moving the second grip. I can turn off my capture view, so I go back to my original view, and then I can play through. The last thing that I want to note is we can make adjustments to these even if we originally set it up to be 1 second. I can drag it out to 3 seconds, and then replay this so that it starts to move a little bit slower. The next thing that we can do is we can drag the playhead further down, and we can rotate the model. It's important to understand that what we're doing is we're transitioning from the current position to the final position. So for example, if we want to go from the right side all the way to the back, that's only going to be one move, even though I did it in 2 selections. So now we can see the components animate, and then it's going to rotate around, zooming in and out. So it's a good idea to make sure that your motions are fluid anytime you're making these adjustments. The last note for you is that the final position of all the components in a storyboard or in this timeline, that's going to be the final location of all the components if this view and this storyboard is going to be used in something like a detailed drawing. It will not, however, make use of the camera position. You'll have to use either a named view or a standard view, such as the home position, in order to capture that design intent. So just simply keep in mind that there are some things we need to be aware of as we're setting these up. But for right now, let's go ahead and save this. And if you want to continue to make adjustments or try on your own, you can create a new storyboard by hitting the plus icon, and you can start it clean or from the end of the previous, and then you can carry on by moving other components in this design, such as the handle, the blade cradle, and so on. For my purposes, however, I'm going to go back to storyboard 1, make sure the design is saved before moving on to the next lesson.